I am a Carlos Garcia. Many do not like witch stories. For many of you, the subject is simply not frightening. It doesn't scare you. It provokes nothing more than disbelief. This story is aimed primarily at you, for whom the subject of witches elicits no response. I invite you to listen to the following story, and if nothing changes in the end, that's fine. But I believe that tonight, after hearing this experience, something might happen. Remember to subscribe to this space so you don't miss any episodes. For now, it's time to turn off the light and let yourself be carried away. You are listening to Grim Secrets. Before anything else, I want to tell you that I was like you, like most people, skeptical, listening to stories for fun, sometimes even confused that people believed in fantastical creatures, in incredible things. I'm talking about when I was a child. Well, I'm not like that anymore. Today, I am one of those people whom many would mock. I used to think that ignorant people believed in the supernatural, but today I know that we are all ignorant of the occult and that almost no one understands it. I now know that people who believe do so because they have been witnesses to the inexplicable or because they are open to the existence of things beyond our comprehension. To tell my story, I need to recount 3 distinct events from different stages of my life, things I would have preferred never to experience. As we grow up, the tranquility of each night vanishes forever. I'll start when I was 12 years old. My mother, widowed since I was a baby, finally found someone worth it, Francisco, whom I came to call Dad. As their relationship became serious, we moved in with him to his house in a neighborhood I already knew and had always been curious about. The grandmother of my best friend, Aldo, lived there, and I had the chance to visit the place when I accompanied my friend and his mom on weekends. Anyone who has visited that place will recognize it from my words. At one time, it was a very affluent neighborhood in the city. The lots were huge, the houses were large with attractive architecture. No house looked like the next, they were all different, all unique. But that was in the past. Those houses are far from their splendor of the 40s or 50s. Today, they can be said to be mostly poor houses of poor people living there. The people who lived there, who walked around, took weeks for me to stop believing it was my mom. Even she, who also heard it, took time to stop believing it was me. Francisco was clear with us. My ex-wife is still here. I can feel her. I can hear her. I hope her presence at night doesn't scare you too much. At night, it's clearer. You can hear someone moving around the house. I just ask you to try not to go outside. I'm afraid you'll see her. I'm afraid of how her ghost would look, and I prefer to remember her as the last time I saw her. I used to accompany him, A. and D. I liked going to see him. I liked his grandmother too. She made me feel at home. I missed him a lot. It was very hard for me to stop seeing him every day at school. Integrating into the new one was really costing me more than usual. One Saturday night when he stayed with his grandmother, I had planned to spend the night with them too. But I didn't account for my mother's plans as usual. I thought about calling her around 10. The neighborhood grew more and more deserted. Some houses seemed completely abandoned, and finally, the street ended with a house at the very back, one I had never seen before that night. It looked like it was made of very dark wood, but it was covered in vines that obscured much of the original structure. I was arriving at my street to turn towards home when a boy a bit older than me ran past. I hadn't seen him before. He looked ghostly. His presence stood out until the boy called out with his arms and encircled him with one. When he entered the house, the WOM, and stopped for a moment. She seemed to be covered by a black veil, or at least that's how dark she looked. But I noticed she turned to look at me, paused for a moment while turning towards me, tilting her head as if to observe me in detail. It terrified me, but I was embarrassed to run, as if deep down I knew it was just a person, and I didn't want to seem like a scared child. The house always made it difficult for me to open the gate, and it took seconds to loosen it and manage to open it. Seconds I couldn't afford to lose tonight. I arrived and climbed over the gate, putting my foot on the chain and trying to jump it. Although I got stuck a little on the sharp points at the top, I felt my pants tear. I fell on the other side with my arm. It was a miracle I didn't break it. I ran up the stairs, putting locks behind me, and climbed up until I heard a sound that seemed to come from the gate. I also felt dampness in my left sock. I checked and had cut myself on the thigh, probably while umping. It was a thin but deep cut. While I was cleaning myself, I approached the window to look out discreetly. Suddenly, I recalled everything I had just seen but wanted to think it was still just a scare. In the heat of the moment, I don't know if this has happened to you. After seeing what I had seen, I only saw with a long, thin arm reaching for something that seemed like a piece of fabric. The piece of my pants, maybe. They brought it close to their dark face as if to smell it and then disappeared behind the wall. I heard what seemed like my mother getting up behind me. I closed the curtain and yelled that I was coming. Turning to look at her, I saw her at the end of the hall entering my room. I went for tea and headed to my room. It didn't seem strange that my mom was up, and I had already put her to bed. "Don't get up, Mom. Try to rest," I said. She tried to sit up a little to drink the tea. I told her I would be back soon as I wanted to go to the bathroom to clean my leg. Wick. H was starting to burn. When I locked myself in the bathroom, I felt a stinging burn in my wound as if a wasp had stung me. At that moment, I started crying. I tried to do it silently, but the pain was too intense. I let out some sobs that surely escaped, but I was too scared to let it go. Each cell in my body seemed activated, in survival mode, I suppose. I couldn't stop pressing it. Apparently, what was said to be outside had moved away from the bathroom. I let the minutes pass. I'm embarrassed to admit that I didn't dare to leave. Even though I knew my mom was in the room defenseless, I just hoped the door was closed, that whatever was in the hall hadn't entered her room. Later, I thought it was the air coming in through there that gave the strange sensation of relief, but it was something different. We heard a distant sound, like a Christmas toy being played somewhere down the path leading to the stream. The dogs in the houses behind began to bark. It was clear something was out to hear. By reflex, I looked at my desk where I had a little Christmas shepherd that made that sound too, a horrible toy, but it was to see that house at the end of the street. This time, it seemed empty and abandoned. The doors that had been wide open were now closed with thick chains, although the padlocks were on the inside. Francisco's house, our house, still felt different. My mom also noticed. We stopped hearing footsteps at night, sounds in the bathroom. At that time, I wondered if what happened, what followed me, was something good. Why were those 3 kids following me? They were about 2 years younger than me. I turned and ignored them, but I noticed they were still following me. I stopped and asked if they needed something. I recognized them. They were the kids from the street behind who played near the stream. "We want to ask you something," they said to me. "Okay, sure." "Oh, you live in the big house across from us on the other side of the stream, right?" "Yes, I think so, I plead. We want to ask you something because something came out of your house, a witch, right?" I told them yes. There was something else, something that had been peeking out for a long time, since Mr. Francisco lived alone. There was something else that also lived in that house. I had a strange feeling, as if someone were touching my neck, and I had to ask the following. The ghost? There was a ghost, right? I also felt it. Francisco says it's his wife. They told me the Lady Maggie wasn't a witch. She was good. When she died, she started to appear through the window. So, you believe that in that house, living and dead, there was a witch that came out that night? 3 years later, The second experience made me see that what happened that night had triggered everything, that it was all the witch's fault at the end of the street. And so we reached the end of our adventure today. How do you feel after all of this? If you're still on edge, don't worry. It's all part of the fun. I want to thank you for joining me in this chilling experience. Your comments and reactions are always what make exploring these dark corners worthwhile. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. That way, you won't miss our upcoming horror stories.